All right, now that you know all of the fundamentals of how to read music, now let's try actually putting it to practice, reading some actual music. Now, a quick disclaimer, if you're looking at these videos, I highly recommend that you wait until you're really comfortable with all the stuff that we went over with the rhythms, the notes, and the style. You have a good understanding of those before you actually start looking at the music. But once you know how those work and you're comfortable doing your subdivisions exercise and naming the different notes, then this is great practice to sort of see how it all comes together. So we're going to go through this exactly the same way as we've been thinking about the music so far. So we're going to start with the rhythm. And of course, with the rhythm, we need our steady beat, our time signature, and then the actual rhythms and the counting. So starting off with our time signature, we have 2/4, which hopefully you know that means there's 2 quarter notes per measure. So now we can sort of figure out where the counts are and how the counting works with that knowledge of there being 2 quarter notes in every single measure. So, of course, we start on 1 because every measure starts on 1, and I really recommend that you write in the countings along with this. So go ahead and just sort of say it with me as we're figuring it out. So we start on 1, like I said, and these are 16th notes. So how do we count 16th notes? If you remember from your subdivision exercise, which you're probably an expert at by now, 16th notes would be 1E and a 2E and a in 2/4. So this first beat is going to be 1E and a, which brings us to 2. And then this is an 8th note on 2. So then this other 8th note is going to be what? And. Yes, because we know 8th notes would be 1 and 2 and. So since we're on 2 and it's 8th notes, it's 2 and. Nice job. So the other thing that's helpful to notice is notice how the beam breaks here. So all 4 of these 16th notes are beamed together. That means that they belong within 1 beat. And these 2 8th notes are beamed together, which means they belong in a different beat. So that's how we can also try to find those 2 quarter notes that we're talking about. These 4 16th notes take up our first quarter note beat. These 2 8th notes take up our second quarter note beat. Another way to think about this is in 2/4, we know that we have to have 2 quarter notes. So our 2 quarter notes are where the beam break is, and then they're being subdivided and split up differently. So in the first beat, they get split into 4 16th notes, and in the second beat, they get split into 2 8th notes. So that's how that counting is working. Now, the other thing that we can sort of use to help ourselves is notice patterns. Music has lots and lots of patterns in the rhythms, in the notes, in the dynamics, and all of those things. So if you look at this second measure, it's actually exactly the same as the first measure, right? So we don't even have to figure it out. We can just see that it's the same and count it as 1E and a 2 and. And then if we continue our patterns in the third measure, this first beat of 16th notes, even though it's not slurred, now it's staccato, it's different notes, but you see the rhythm is still 4 16th notes, so we know that's going to be 1E and a. Now this time, instead of the second quarter note being split into 2 8th notes, it's just 1 quarter note. So that's just 2. And then the fourth measure is another repeat of the third measure. So now we know that that's 1E and a 2. Now, going on to the fifth measure, this one's different than any of the measures we've had before, but this one's pretty easy to figure out, again, because you're great at your subdivision exercise, so it's just all 16th notes. So all 16th notes in 2/4 would be 1E and a, 2E and a, and then the next measure is identical. You may be tempted to look at this and say 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a, but that wouldn't be right because we have this bar line here. We're in 2/4, not 4/4, so we're only going up to 2 quarter notes per measure. So this one's going to be 1E and a, 2E and a, and then our last measure is the same as the third and fourth measure with 16th notes on the first beat, and then a nice quarter note on the second beat. So that's how the rhythm works for the counting of this whole exercise. You can see there's lots of repetition, lots of patterns. It's not too bad at all. But don't forget about your steady beat. You could count this as 1E and a 2 and 1E and a 2 and 1E and a 2, 1E and a 2, 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2, E and a 1E and a 2. And that would not be the right rhythm at all because we were missing the steady beat. So don't ever forget about your steady beat. In fact, we can pull up a metronome to work on our practicing of the steady beat. So I'm going to put my metronome on at 100. And now I can count. And with the metronome going at that speed, that's going to be each number. And actually I'm going to slow it down a little bit because 16th notes are already kind of fast, so we don't need our steady beat to be too fast. So I turned the metronome down to 80. That feels better. So for this, remember that click is happening on each number. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And then we have to fit our 16th notes. Remember how I drew those quarter notes getting split up? So in this first quarter note, there's going to be 4 16th notes and then our 2 8th notes. So let's try saying this rhythm with the steady beat. And it's great to sort of tap your foot. You can clap along with the steady beat. It's great to do it with the metronome and have multiple sources of the steady beat so that you're really keeping track of it. So let's try counting this. 1, 2, ready, go. 1E and a 2 and 1E and a 2 and 1E and a 2, 1E and a 2, 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2. That was still a little bit fast. Let's slow it down even more to 60 and try it again. And this is a great lesson for all of your music. If anything feels uncomfortable, if it doesn't feel easy and simple to do at whatever speed you're going, just go slower. We always want to be comfortable and confident when we're reading our music. So let's try counting again now at this speed. 1, 2, ready, go. 1E and a 2 and 1E and a 2 and 1E and a 2, 1E and a 2, 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2. That probably felt a lot more comfortable. If it still doesn't feel comfortable, you can go even slower. If there's one specific spot, maybe it's going from the quarter note to a full measure of 16th notes. If something like that is more difficult, then you could always isolate it and just practice with the metronome 1E and a 2, 1E and a 2E and a, and just isolate what you're having issues with so that you can really get it down and then integrate it back into the whole and put it all together. Whatever it takes to get comfortable and confident with the rhythm is really important and what you should do. Now, you probably heard already, if you were listening to the pitches that I was singing, that I'm already starting to think about the notes. And that's okay if you were just counting the rhythm, but let's start talking about the notes because that's the next big important thing that we need to tackle. So with the notes, I don't usually like to write all of the notes in. I'm a big fan of writing in the counting. Maybe on this you wouldn't have to write in the counting for every measure. Maybe you do just the first measure, you know the second measure is the same, so you don't need the counts there. The third measure or fourth measure is the same as the third measure, so you don't need the counts there. But in general, I'm a big fan of writing in the counting. I'm less of a fan of writing in the notes because that starts to become too much to think of. If you're reading a note and a count at the same time and then trying to figure out how that works together, that can get really confusing. The better thing to think about for the notes is the pattern of the notes. So you can see how this note goes up just one step and then back to the first note and then back one step up again, and then we get a leap up that goes down a step. So if you can start to read what I call the contour of sort of down, up, that actually makes it a lot easier for reading the notes. And just like we practiced on our naming the notes section where we were starting with our G clef, looking at the G line and counting up and down, you can start to count up and down from maybe your starting note. So once we figure out what the starting note is, we know we just go up one, back to the starting note, up one, and then up 2, and then down 1, and you can start to sort of count from where you're at rather than having to go to the G line, figure out this note. Go back to the G line, figure out this note. Back to the G line, figure out this note. If you can start reading the patterns this way, then it gets a lot easier and goes a lot more smoothly. So again, that's why I don't love always writing in the note names. Now, if you're just beginning with reading music, it's okay to write in the note names. So let's do just a little bit of that to get practice naming our notes, and then we'll talk about more reading the contour. So first we need to figure out what this note is down here. So if we start here with our G line, we are going down, so we go backwards through the musical alphabet. So the line is G, this space would be F, this line would be E, this space would be D. You see how we're going backwards? G, F, E, D. And then this line is one more backwards, which is C. Excellent. So that's C. Now we know that this is just one higher than C. So if we're going higher, we go forwards through the alphabet. So what's the letter after C in the alphabet? D. Good job. And then we're back to C where we started, back to D again, and now we have this note. So this note you could either think about counting up from D, going forwards through the alphabet to this line and to this space, or you could start at your G line and go backwards one space, which would be one letter before G, or two letters after D, which is also known as F. Excellent. Now we go backwards through the alphabet one, and we're here at E. So you can see how you can use sort of your reading from the G line, or you can also go from the notes that you've already figured out. And just like the rhythms, we can also look at the patterns, where measure 2 is exactly the same as measure 1, right? So I don't think we need to write in the note names for there. I think you should know what they are because it's exactly the same. Then we go on to the third measure, and we can know right away that we're starting on C without having to count down from G, because we've played so many Cs already. We know where that C is, and that C is starting to become an anchor note. The next thing that we can see in this measure is that it's just going straight up, one step at a time. Space, line, space, line. So we're just going to be going forwards through the alphabet. So you can very easily just go forwards through the alphabet from C. So we go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and that's that measure. So you can see how it's pretty easy to figure out the notes and start to see the patterns. Now the next step is to try and actually hear where those notes go. You don't have to hear exactly the right starting note. If you have an instrument or have something that can play that starting note for you, then that would be nice and would make it easy. But it doesn't really matter what note you start on. What matters is how you're going from note to note. So as you could hear when I was counting the rhythms, I was already starting to do that, where maybe let's say we start here, and then we're going up, here, up, back, up, further up, down, here, up, back, up, further up, down. So you can sort of start to sing the pattern. Dee da dee da da dum. Dee da dee da da dum. Let's try doing the whole thing through together really, really nice and slow, just about the speed that I was just going. So let's try singing this. Let's sing it on La together and see if we can make it through getting the approximate shape. It doesn't have to be exactly the right notes, but we're watching the contour and going up when the notes go up, down when the notes go down. Let's try that. Ready? Go. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. And if you noticed, I didn't quite sing the right notes here, but that's okay, because it got higher and was in the right direction, and we kept the shape. So it's okay for you to not sing exactly the right notes as well, but if you can get the general shape of it, that's a great start to learning the notes, and will help you to sort of hear what the music's going to be as you start to play it, or if you were just listening to it and hearing how it goes. So that's the notes. Do you remember what the final category of things to think about when reading music is? If you said style, that's correct. So we have a lot of other information here besides just the notes and rhythms. You see these little swoopies here. We have some of these things here. And let's talk about what those are. So let's start with the articulation. So if you remember, articulation is the way that the notes are shaped. So this swoop here is called a slur, and that's a type of articulation, meaning that these notes are all really connected together. There's no tonguing between, no separation between. These notes are very connected. And then we have a separation in the slurs, so there will be a little break there, and then another little break there, little break there, little break there. And then we get to these little dots below the notes. Those are staccato, which means separated. So now we go from super connected slurred notes to staccato separated notes for that articulation. And that's pretty much all the articulations in this piece. We have some generic nothing, which means that they're tongued and articulated separately, but not super short like staccato, or not as short as staccato. But that's all the articulation we have. So we have slur, 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 staccato up here, slur, normal, slur, 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 staccato, slur, normal. And that's basically the quick overview of the articulation and the shapes of the notes. Now we also have down here our dynamics, which are the volume of the notes. So do you remember what MP means? You can either say the Italian word and or what volume it is. So MP tells us the volume, but is it loud or is it soft? It's soft. And it's medium soft. Mezzo piano is what the little MP stands for, and that means medium soft. And then we have these lines, which are crescendo, which means getting louder, and we're getting louder to forte, which means loud, and then diminuendo back down to our medium soft, crescendo again to loud, back down to medium soft, crescendo to loud, and then we have nothing here, which we'll talk about later. And then we get even louder with two F's as fortissimo, that's the loudest. And then we gradually get softer over two measures now to our medium soft dynamic at the ending. So when you have no dynamics marked, it means one of two things. It means that you just keep the same dynamic that you had before, or it means that the composer is sort of leaving it up to you and you can make some decisions about how loud you want to play that. So I think it works okay to just stay forte through here and then try to play it louder here. But what I personally like to do is come back down to mezzo piano here. The reason why I do that is because this is mezzo piano, C, D, C, D. And here we have the same thing, C, D, C, C. It feels like it should be softer because it's similar to the stuff that we play soft throughout the entire piece. And it also helps this fortissimo to sound even more exciting and loud because we're starting soft before that. So that covers the rhythms, the notes, the style, and everything to do with the music here and how to read the music, which means now you're ready to play it because you have a really good idea of how the music goes. So what I recommend now is trying to get it to all come together. And you can do this either by playing it if you know how to play an instrument, singing it, or just counting and getting sort of an approximation of how it goes. Let me start by demonstrating how I would count through this, getting the notes, the rhythms, the style, getting all of the musical details. So first, as always, we get our steady beat going. and then we're going to sing and say the counting. So by singing the notes, we're getting the notes. By saying the counting, we're getting the rhythm. And then I'm also going to sing the dynamics and the articulations to get that as well. So let's try doing this together. If you want to watch through it once with me just doing it on my own so you can get a feel for how it goes, that's okay. But then rewind it and let's do it together. Or if you feel ready to do it together, let's do it. So this is our steady beat. 1, 2, ready, go. So this is going to be our steady beat, nice and slow. I always recommend sort of hearing the music, hearing the speed you want to play the music, and that's where you can get your steady beat from. So let's try it together. 1, 2, ready, go. 1 E and a 2 and 1 E and a 2 and 1 E and a 2, 1 E and a 2. 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2. So that's how the music goes, and even without an instrument, I think we got a pretty good idea of how it goes. Let me try playing it on my clarinet for you and see how close we were when we were singing. I think we were pretty close, and I'll let you in on a little secret. The reason why we were really close is because when I was playing the clarinet, I was making the clarinet do what I had imagined for the music. So it wasn't actually that the clarinet was the same as what we had sung. It was I knew what we had sung and knew how it should go, and I made the clarinet do that. That's a good tip for any of you who play an instrument, that you want to always have a clear idea of how the music should go, and then you're making the instrument do that and making the music come out through the instrument rather than just playing the instrument and seeing whatever the instrument wants to give you for the music. So that's our first example of how to read music. The next few videos are going to have more, and I'm going to go a little bit more quickly in the other videos, so feel free to take your time, rewatch this one, and get a really good understanding of how we went through rhythm, notes, and style, and brought that all together into a piece of music.